that mag feed. And I can't wait to go across the pond to listen to Across the Pod, fresh out of Wales. Special stuff. Cheers.
Hello everyone, Andy here, and here's what you can look forward to in today's episode. In today's episode, I was joined by Ben Isaacs as we rank our top 10 Super Bowls we never got. Ben discusses which mouth-watering game we never had.
And we were robbed of what I think would have been the best Super Bowl of the 1980s.
I discuss which game I found out about through a TV show.
This actually alludes to, I actually first heard of this moment through How I Met Your Mother rather than NFL history. It was, of course.
And much more as we rank our top 10 list. Hope you all enjoy.
Should they be in the Hall of Fame? No.
Yeah.
No.
Because hello everyone and welcome back to the Across the Pod NFL podcast for episode 2 of our brand new series on the podcast. I am, as ever, your host today, Andy Davis, and in today's episode we're doing something that was planned about a year ago. Let's take you back to a year ago when this episode idea was brought together in the Super Bowl. But who knows? That's a lot of ifs.
Yeah, that's the greatest Super Bowl that we never got to see.
That might be a topic for next off-season, is the top 10 best Super Bowls we never got, because certainly those will be on that list.
Book me in for that, Andy. I love it.
And as you can see, that does mean our guest is going to be obvious who is going to be. Back on the show today is Ben Isaacs. Ben, how are you?
I'm great. Do I look a year older is the question.
I think you look a year younger. I don't know whether you've got less facial hair, but you, I wouldn't say that at all.
I'm glad you say that because I am celebrating a birthday tomorrow. And you and I have, I think, quite a lot in common, but one thing we do not have in common is our ages. And I think that may be reflected when we go through our lists here. I think one of the things we might have in common is a disappointment of missed opportunities by the Miami Dolphins, who, when I was growing up, were one of the most entertaining and exciting teams to watch in the NFL. And they should have been in more Super Bowls. And also, we potentially may have been born in the same hospital. But I don't think the two events are connected. And I need to be totally transparent with everyone listening and watching. I am having a beer right now, and that is a birthday beer, because, like I say, it's my birthday tomorrow, and it is a Welsh beer, Andy. I won't mention the brand because they're not a sponsor, so they're not getting any free advertising from me. If you do have any potential sponsors who are beer brands who want to send me some beer that I will then drink when I am recording with you, then that is fine, but no free advertising. That's my rule.
Well, yeah, if any beers want to sponsor us, and you probably can see there, if you had a quick look on YouTube, you can probably see what beer he was drinking. But if any beers are looking to sponsor the show, then do send the show a DM. And a lot of mine are post 21st century. I think there's a lot of mine at the Super Bowl's got from 14 above, so it's I'm intrigued to see what yours are going to be. And we are going to, as normal, compile our top 10 and try and assemble what we think is the top 10 Super Bowls we never got. So let's start with you, Ben. As always, the guest goes first. What is your first nominee for this top 10?
I am going to go with what I think is the clear number one. That whenever anyone talks about missed opportunity Super Bowls, this is the one I think that comes up the most. And when I was younger, Super Bowls were horrendous, Andy. I cannot tell you how bad they were. It was bleak times. And usually the AFC would throw out a team that for some reason decided to pretty much take the day off and get absolutely hammered by an NFC team. So my first selection for a Super Bowl that we never got was Super Bowl 20 should have been the Bears against the Dolphins. The Patriots had beaten the Dolphins in Miami for only the second time ever. And bear in mind, they played every season and they had not won in Miami since the Dolphins' first ever season. So it was a huge shock that the Patriots won that game. They went on an incredible tear through the playoffs, won every game on the road, then played the Bears. The 85 Bears, I believe, are the greatest team of all time and got absolutely hammered. But obviously the Dolphins did beat the Bears that season, the only blemish on that Bears record. And the Dolphins that season were absolutely brilliant. They were a year removed from being AFC champions. They were convincingly beaten by the San Francisco 49ers. And maybe they would have been convincingly beaten by the Chicago Bears. The Bears players desperately wanted to play the Dolphins again. As soon as the Dolphins beat the Bears, they were saying, we're gonna face this team in the Super Bowl. We're going to get our revenge. They were confident because the Dolphins were the clear class of the AFC. And in a very soggy game at the old Miami Orange Bowl, the Dolphins lost to the Patriots, and we were robbed of what I think would have been the best Super Bowl of the 1980s. Dan Marino, once again, against that 46 defense. And who's to say they wouldn't have won? They'd beaten them once before, and I think that game would have been absolutely unreal.
Yeah, I mean, this was one of the ones I had put down. One of the first I thought of when it comes to that, because even though obviously way before my time, I wasn't even alive at this point when this game happened. Through being a Dolphins fan and through being part of many Dolphins group chats and fan pages and all this kind of stuff, you do sort of hear about that team that beat the Bears, and 31-14. Looking at the records, the actual Patriots had a similar record to the Dolphins that season, but I think the fact that the Dolphins go out and beat the Bears, and there's in that regular season game, and there's the whole talk about his whole career about Dan Marino never won a Super Bowl. I think the fact that he's gone out and beaten the Bears already means there's a good chance that he could have really ended what has been since he retired, and throughout his career, a constant reminder of him that he never played in the Super Bowl again after the one against the 49ers. Only got to what I think this was his only ever conference championship appearance in his whole career since they won it and made the Super Bowl. So, yeah, Dan Marino would have ended a lot of his demons. I think there's a lot of connotations about, Mike Ditka. He would have been probably more known as the guy who he may not even got the Saints job, but if he got the Saints job, he would have been known more so as the guy who gave all his picks for Ricky Williams. He would have, I think, the fact that he won a Super Bowl with the Bears is part of his legacy. His legacy wouldn't be there if they hadn't have won the Super Bowl. You think about all the stars he had at the Bears. Think of the fridge. You think about Walter Payton. Without a ring on their resume, who knows what people would have thought of them. So yeah, a lot of connotations for this game. And I think as a Dolphins fan especially, and someone who older fans would probably think a lot more of me than this. But yeah, certainly in this opportunity. For Dan Marino and the Dolphins, I think even if the Patriots had gone out and put up 30 points or lost by a couple of points, that would be understandable. But they got absolutely demolished, in that Super Bowl. And you mentioned it then, a lot of bad Super Bowls. There was a run. Looking at the run of Super Bowls we had.
Oh yeah.
You got Niners Dolphins 38-16. That Bears Patriots 46-10. You had a 42-10 Redskins against Broncos. You had Dallas Cowboys Bills 52-17. Niners Chargers 49-26.
There was a 55-10 the 49ers over the Broncos as well. It was, and the thing is, those AFC teams, it's not like they were bad. You look at that Patriots team, it was a bit of a fluke. And I think nine times out of 10, that Dolphins team would have won that AFC championship, and you'd have Dan Marino there. But you had like John Elway in multiple Super Bowls, and it was a disaster. Then you had Jim Kelly 4 Super Bowls in a row for the Buffalo Bills, and each of those just seemed to get worse and worse. And sometimes the NFC teams didn't even have good quarterbacks. Jim McMahon is no John Elway and no Dan Marino. The Giants won Super Bowls with Jeff Hostetler and Phil Simms. It was it was weird how the AFC would get to these Super Bowls and not perform. And it felt like they had the quarterbacks, but perhaps not the defenses and not the coaches. And that's certainly the Dolphins had the coaches. The Dolphins had Don Shula, one of the greatest of all time, easily in the top 10 at the very least coaches of all time. And obviously he's the one who'd figured out this Bears defense, the only coach that season. But there were just so many teams that in a period of about 10 years, I mean, I think the AFC lost something stupid like 15 Super Bowls in a row. And there was talk, should we just play the top two teams and not have NFC versus AFC? And even as a kid, I thought, this is nonsense, because this thing, it just kind of evens out. It's just how it is. You know, it's not always going to be like this. And obviously it hasn't been like that since. But as a Bears fan, I still wish it had been the Dolphins.
Really? Because you may not have won a Super Bowl if...
I know. I think, and I've been doing a lot of research into that Dolphins team and that Bears team recently. And I think there was so much going on with the Bears at that point that they really, so to take you back to week 13 in 1985, Mike Ditka was basically in a war with Buddy Ryan, the Bears defensive coordinator. And Buddy Ryan was playing an incredibly aggressive defense against Dan Marino, and it wasn't working. But he refused to change it, in part because Mike Ditka told him to change it, and he was not going to do anything that Mike Ditka told him to do. So he persevered, basically, to spite Mike Ditka. Now, the Bears players feel that the reason they won the Super Bowl was that game was the kick up the arse they needed. And they feel very confident that they would not have performed like that against the Dolphins. Now, maybe they would, maybe they wouldn't. But I think the Bears would have won. And I think that season, with that as the crowning achievement, that they got revenge on the one team that beat them, it would have just been that much sweeter. And I would say, and this goes for any of these older teams I'm talking about, whether it's the winner or whether it's a team that I wish had got to the Super Bowl, there's just so much great stuff on YouTube. So if you are a modern fan and you know the name Dan Marino and you know that he's one of the all-time greats, do you know what? Look at some games on YouTube, or I bet like the official NFL Throwback YouTube channel has probably got like 50 best Dan Marino touchdown passes or something. If you are not used to seeing some of these players, go back and watch them and remember how hard it was to throw the ball in the 1980s, because you could be so much more physical with the wide receivers. And players like Dan Marino were still breaking records that were people like Dan Marino broke records people thought would never be broken. And still it was hard, even in the modern NFL, to break the sort of records that he set. God, I love Dan Marino, Andy. I don't know if that's coming across, but I love Dan Marino.
That is very clear. And I think, I'm in a Dolphins fan group, and I reckon about 85%, if not 90% of the people I've met in the fan group, all of that same era, the Channel 4 era, they're all fans because of him. He probably recruited a lot of Dolphins fans in the UK. Here's why there's a lot of, they are one of the most followed teams in the UK. The same
still
thing with
today.
The Bears. But the Bears, Walter Payton, the Chiefs, the Niners, Joe Montana, these teams from the 80s who were good have still got a lot of fans because of players like Marino. So, yeah, if you look at this tape, it is unbelievable. And
you know what, Andy? You're absolutely right. You're 100% right with what you say. But more than that, players like Dan Marino created fandom in this country. They're not just Dolphins fans, which obviously there's a good reason the Dolphins are one of the most supported teams this side of the Atlantic, and it's nothing to do with recent players. They had such an amount of support at that time because they were so exciting to watch, and Dan Marino was incredible, that there will have been so many people who turned on Channel 4 because it was opposite like Songs of Praise and happened to catch Dan Marino play, and even if they didn't become a Dolphins fan, Andy, even if they didn't become a Dolphins fan, watching Dan Marino will have made them think, I'm going to watch this next week. And they start getting hooked. So Dan Marino is easily, and some of those other sort of players and teams you mentioned, like Walter Payton and the likes of Joe Montana, they are a huge reason that we are sat here decades later being able to talk about this sport, because they set the foundations for the sport in this country, because they were just unreal TV. So, Dan, if you're listening, thank you for help creating the UK fan scene. He is listening, right?
Of course, yeah. Dan's a regular listener of the show. He constantly tweets in. But oh yeah, unbelievable. And you mentioned top 10 head coaches as well. We actually did an episode last year on that, so do check it out on our Spotify feed if you haven't already. But let's head on to, I could talk about Marino all day, but let's talk about our next nominee. And it's one that you're probably going to guess what I'm going to say. It is what should have been, in my opinion, Super Bowl 53, Chiefs against Rams. Now, one thing I will say, the Rams shouldn't have been in that Super Bowl. The no call, the Rams shouldn't have been there. The Saints should have been there regardless. But you think about what happened in the game earlier that day, Chiefs against Patriots, the D Ford penalty, it could have been oh so different. And the Chiefs with their exciting sophomore quarterback, Patrick Mahomes, MVP season. You think about they could have easily been there. And the main reason why I'm putting this in is not because of that. It's because of what we got earlier that season when the Chiefs took on the Rams in a game that was originally planned for Mexico. But because of pitch concerns, it took it back to the Coliseum where the Rams took on the Chiefs. I want to say it was week 9. Either way, it was Monday Night Football. And it turned out to be one of the best ever games the league's ever seen.
I've still not recovered from that game. It was mind-boggling.
I watched it the next morning, watched highlights on YouTube. I wish I watched that game live because, oh my goodness, we got a game. 54-51 was the final score in favour of the Rams. A game that actually, I think, had a big say in... no, the Chiefs were home in that AFC Championship. But, yeah, I mean, obviously, Saints got screwed, but if we got the Chiefs Rams, I'm not saying it would have been 54-51 again, but I guarantee you it would have been a way better game than the one we did get when the Patriots took on the Rams and it was 13-3. Yeah, Atlanta was robbed of maybe one of the best Super Bowls we've ever seen, because I can guarantee you it would have been way better if those two teams were involved.
It won't surprise you that it was on my list, but I had a slight tweak. I had it as Chiefs Saints. Because of the fact that they were screwed, and the Rams, as good as that team was, were so unimpressive in the Super Bowl that for most of my picks, I've generally swapped a team that basically just didn't turn up and have kept the winner. But in this one, it was about the Chiefs. The Patriots won that Super Bowl fair and square, but it was about wanting the Chiefs in that Super Bowl. And obviously we've had plenty of Chiefs Super Bowls, but I had Chiefs Saints on this one. Obviously those two teams lost very close conference championships. And with things being slightly different, we'd have had a very different game. You would like to think we would have had a very different game.
Absolutely. It just felt for me when I was watching that it just felt like they weren't meant to be there. I think when you're watching the game and watching how the offense played out, and obviously excited for the game because the Rams were great all year, and Rams could have easily put in a good performance. It would have been a great game, but it just felt like the Rams. I don't know whether the Rams themselves sort of subconsciously thought they shouldn't have been there, because I think we all know what happened in that game. The no call on within the Cal Roby Coleman was the player involved. For me, yeah, it was just an all-time shame, because you think about what happened the 2 years previously. You had Super Bowl 51. Patriots Falcons 28-3. Next year you had Eagles Patriots. Probably the two best Super Bowls I've ever seen in back-to-back years. You think about followed up those two, Lady Gaga the 1 year, Justin Timberlake, and then you get that disaster of a game, disaster of a halftime show. It was just all round an absolute damp squid. I think that is the word. I think damp squid, and it's not even as if a team you like won it. Like, it's not as if it was like let's say the Vikings won that game, you think, oh, okay, first time winner. You think about a team that was likable. The fact that it was the Patriots winning again, it was just all round, not a good Super Bowl at all. And I think it would have been a lot better, if either team had won.
Yeah, it was a different kind of boring Super Bowl, because the ones I was talking about from the 80s and 90s, they were boring because one team just got hammered. Whereas this was just a boring game. It just did not live up to any of our expectations. And in a period where generally the Super Bowls were more entertaining than they were when I was younger, that is one that stands out as just a bit of a snooze fest, basically. And yeah, I agree 100%. It was definitely on my list.
Well, let's go on to our next nominee. Now, I don't know whether you want to put your next nominee as Patriots against Saints, or is there one you want to put in?
No, I'm gonna go something different. I'm going to go to Super Bowl 35, which was at the end of the 2000 season, and the Ravens hammered the Giants. So the Giants beat the Minnesota Vikings in the NFC Championship game, and I missed the game. And it was on a Sunday. It was like a 6 p.m. Sunday game, if I remember correctly. And I was out. And I remember that my girlfriend at the time, I was moaning at her that I was going to miss this game, and got back just as the game was ending. And I was thinking the Vikings were going to just hammer the Giants. The Vikings were so good that year. And the Vikings got blown out by the Giants. I couldn't believe it. And I thought, okay, well, maybe the Giants are better than I expected. And as it is, they came up against this Ravens team that has one of the best defenses of all time. And it was awful. It was awful. The Kerry Collins Giants, it was awful. So I did think about, that Vikings team. That would have been a much better Super Bowl. But I'm not going with the Vikings. I'm going with the Rams. The Rams, the season before, had won the Super Bowl, the so-called greatest show on turf. We had, of that era, the greatest offense that we had seen. And we could have had them up against the greatest defense of that era. That 2000 Ravens team led by Ray Lewis was brilliant. That Rams offense, it's difficult to really explain how impressive it was, because we see so many impressive offenses now, but we hadn't really seen one like that for a long time. And it's possible that this Vikings offense was the best Vikings offense of all time. But that Rams offense in 1999 had revolutionized the way offense was played. What we see now from offenses was kind of invented by that Rams team. And I think them against that 2000 Ravens team, one of the best defenses ever, that could have been a Super Bowl for the ages.
Yeah, I think that Super Bowl as well. And we had the classic Trent Dilfer situation. I mean, that I think that alone should have been maybe a reason why, because Trent Dilfer is seen by many as the worst ever starting quarterback to win a Super Bowl. I think others you could think of, but yeah, I never really thought about this year because of that year, because I knew obviously of the Ravens playing the Giants. I knew it wasn't exactly a great game, but I just never thought about it. I just never thought about that team and that Rams team because they made it the year before.
Yeah, the thing is that it's obviously now a famous moment in history, but when the Rams the following year played the Patriots, it was thought, we are seeing a dynasty kick into gear now, because the Rams had won the Super Bowl 2 years before. Kurt Warner, Marshall Faulk, this wide open offense. And we did see the start of a dynasty, but obviously it was the start of a Patriots dynasty, and that Rams team never came close to reaching those heights. But they were absolutely remarkable. It is just a weird quirk of fate that the Super Bowl they did win actually was a bit of a defensive struggle against the Tennessee Titans the previous season, and was nothing like the games that the Rams had played in the regular season up to that point. If the Rams or the Vikings were in that Super Bowl, it would have been a lot better than that Kerry Collins Giants.
Kerry Collins as well. Kerry
I
Collins.
know, it's tragic.
My goodness, that actually does remind me of one of my nominees I might mention later on today. It's funny you mentioned Vikings. Oh, what were you? I feel like you're.
No, I've got something on my list that I don't think I will get to, but relates to Kerry Collins as well. So I maybe we're on the same page. You would surprise me if that was your pick, but we'll figure it out along the way.
Yeah, especially as my one maybe would basically replaces what I think is the best Super Bowl I've ever watched. But that's a little clue into later on. So my next nominee, it's funny you mentioned the Vikings and that season. I've gone for a game, I can't think whether it was the year before, 2 seasons before that. We should have got Vikings against Broncos. And this actually alludes to, I actually first heard of this moment through How I Met Your Mother rather than NFL history. It was, of course, NFC Championship. The Vikings took on the Falcons. And I will say the Falcons were 14-2 that year. They weren't some 7-9 wildcard team. They were still a good team. But the Vikings had a 10-point lead in the fourth quarter. Gary Anderson, who hadn't missed a kick all year, had the chance to basically put them out of reach. And they ended up losing that game. And obviously the Falcons go on and lose that to the Broncos. But there's multiple reasons why. I mean, first of all, the Vikings were 15-1.
Best Vikings team, I think, in history.
Yeah, I mean, the Brett Favre team came close. I mean, the interception. But I think in terms of people on paper, you think about Randall Cunningham, a quarterback. They had Chris Carter, Randy Moss, who won Rookie of the Year and had the most receiving touchdowns that year in the league as well for a rookie. Unbelievable. The whole NFL, as a rookie, he had more receiving touchdowns than anyone in the entire NFL. John Randall on defense. You had the league MVP and Terrell Davis on the Broncos. He won, obviously, Super Bowl MVP as well that day. John Elway as well. You think about the players you would have got against each other. You think about as well John Elway's legacy. I know he can't think whether he'd won. Yeah, he won one the year before.
He'd won one the year before, but he'd lost like 4 before that. And being able to go out with 2 victories in a row and then retire completely changed how he was looked at. If he had lost, if the Vikings had been in that game and had beaten them, and bear in mind, the Vikings, like you say, they were 15-1. Their only regular season loss was by 3 points. It was that close. They were just a few points away from having a perfect season. If the Vikings had been in that game and had won it, people would look at John Elway as, okay, he got that one win with a comeback win against the Packers, but my God, he lost a lot of Super Bowls, didn't he? And his final game was another Super Bowl defeat. And that's what I think he would be known for. I think now his legacy is those 2 Super Bowl wins at the end that just, cemented everything, even though it was mostly down to his offensive line and down to Terrell Davis. No knock on John Elway, but he wasn't at his peak at this point. That Vikings team, I'm glad you said it. Needless to say, it was on my list. It was on my list. That Vikings team was absolutely ridiculous. Ridiculous. It's criminal that we didn't get that game. And poor Gary Anderson.
Yeah, I mean, again, the fact that I knew who he was before really. When I watched that episode of How I Met Your Mother, I was just a casual fan. I had no history of no knowledge of NFL history. I just knew Julio Jones, Tom Brady, Donald Driver, all these players, Drew Brees, the players that played 10 or 15 years before that, I had no idea who they were. So the fact that even from watching a non-sport program, he gets mentioned, he must every day think about that. You think about. There's moments in sport, you think about John Terry slip, Steven Gerrard slip. There's an old clip of a rugby league game when the guy kicks from a ridiculously close angle. There's these moments in sports that people get remembered for unless they can, turn around and do something else a year later and change the narrative. If you have that one moment and don't ever replicate that and get to the same stage again, or you don't win anything, you get remembered for it. And Gary Anderson will always be remembered for that kick. And everyone forgets that he went perfect that year before that moment. Everyone forgets that he didn't miss a kick the entire season. Everyone remembers the fact that he missed that kick.
I'm sure that some Vikings fans would rather he'd missed a few along the way, but nailed that one. That Falcons team, they were no bums. But the quarterback was Chris Chandler. Jamal Anderson, I want to say, was the running back and perhaps their best player. They were nowhere near equipped to face that Broncos team. The Vikings were the best team in the NFL that year by a clear margin. And they have, the Vikings have been in 4 Super Bowls and lost them all, but well before this time. And you look at the Vikings history and, in the kind of 60s and 70s, it was losing Super Bowls. And since then, it's just falling apart in the playoffs when you've got a brilliant team. This isn't even the only time that we're talking about the Vikings messing up in the NFC Championship when they've got a great team. But to me, this was the pinnacle. That Randy Moss rookie season, they looked unplayable. And perhaps the only team that could have beaten them, it looked like, was that Broncos team. And maybe they would have, maybe they wouldn't have, but I really wish we'd got to see it.
Yeah, I mean, it's continuing even to this day. I mean, nothing is more Vikings. They're not only having 14 wins in the season and not winning your division, but also to then have a quarterback you get rid of for a guy who doesn't perform well the following year, and that quarterback you got rid of goes on and wins the Super Bowl. Not obviously he wasn't I think the defense and maybe was the main reason why they won that Super Bowl, but Sam Darnold won a Super Bowl, and you kind of think the team that they had, obviously you think about, I think there's better coaching and better sort of a team around him in Seattle. But you think about Jordan Addison, Justin Jefferson, Aaron Jones on his day, that Vikings team this year, if they'd kept Darnold, they could have easily won 13, 14 games again.
Yes.
And I think that, for me, that is just the perfect analogy for the Vikings sort of luck. I think them and the Bills probably are the 2 franchises, maybe the Chargers you could put in this as well, that just never ever seem to get it right. No matter how many coaches they have, quarterbacks, draft picks, that they never seem to get over this this bit of bad luck they have on the franchise. Next up for your third nominee, Ben, who are you going to, or which game are you going to pick?
So I've on my list, I've just swapped a couple round in the order of preference, because the more we talked about the ones we've talked about, the more I started to think about, okay, I've got to bump this one up. And this one was a little bit complicated for me because it kind of encompasses 2 seasons. It could be the 93 season. It could be the 94 season. So that's Super Bowl 28 and Super Bowl 29. And you'll have to bear with me here. Okay. In one of these years, I wanted 49ers Chiefs. Now, 94, the 49ers got to the Super Bowl, blew out the Chargers, and it was a terrible game. And maybe the Chiefs would have been better. However, the Chiefs were better the year before when they lost in the conference championship, as did the 49ers. But let's say 94, Super Bowl 29, when the 49ers beat the Chargers. I really wanted it to be the Chiefs. Now, in that game, the Chargers just seemed like they were happy to be there and got absolutely annihilated. You'd mentioned it near the top of the show. The Chiefs, why would they have been that much better? They might not have been better, but we would have had Joe Montana against the 49ers in a Super Bowl against Steve Young, and there was no love lost between Steve Young and Joe Montana. The 49ers pushed Joe Montana out because they were so confident that Steve Young could be at least as good as Joe Montana. So they pushed him out. He went to the Chiefs. He was desperate to win a Super Bowl with them, as you can imagine. Now, Steve Young eventually won one, that Chargers game. But if that game had been against Montana and the Chiefs, I'm not sure there would have been a more hyped Super Bowl in terms of a rivalry. That Bears-Dolphins game we talked about, I think, would have been off the charts in terms of the media coverage. But the rivalry between Montana and Steve Young, Montana facing his old team, it would have been absolute box office. I'm not convinced the Chiefs would have won. I don't think that would have happened. That 49ers team of 94 was just so good, and there's a reason that the Chiefs didn't even get to the championship game. But the Chargers shouldn't have been there. I'm not sure anyone in the AFC was going to beat that 49ers team. But my God, I would have at least loved the build-up of Montana versus the 49ers in a Super Bowl. Just the mind boggles.
I mean, that's an amazing shout. I don't think we really had that since, apart from there could have been a Rodgers against Packers this year. There could have been Rodgers against. I mean, that would have been for, we all know how Rodgers is and how it's sort of been since, or even you could argue it could have been if Favre done well with the Jets. Imagine Favre against Rodgers. It would be that thing where the guy takes over. Yeah, I mean, we've not really had anything I can think of, particularly at quarterback, where that's such a high-profile position. I can't think of any other Super Bowls had.
No, I don't think there's been one where the quarterback was so significant. So there was one in, I can't remember the year, but it was the Broncos against the Cowboys in the 70s, and the Broncos quarterback had been the Cowboys quarterback, but they had replaced him with someone a lot better than him. And it was no surprise that they had moved on from Craig Morton, and Craig Morton was then the quarterback of the Broncos, and the Broncos lost convincingly to the Cowboys. It was a revenge game for Craig Morton, but the general public were not like, oh my God, Craig Morton's going to face the Cowboys. He's got a chance of getting revenge. It was not like that. I'm sure it was before my time, but I'm pretty sure from everything I know about NFL history that wasn't it. The closest I think we've got was when Gruden at the Bucks faced the Raiders, and all the history he'd had with the Raiders, and he would was it his first season at Tampa Bay away from the Raiders and then hammering them in the Super Bowl. That's the closest I can think of, but that's not the same as having these two superstar Hall of Fame quarterbacks dueling it out when there is something personal because of the fact that one had played for the other team. I would have loved it.
I mean, this season, I think it's never going to happen. But can you imagine if it was Falcons Dolphins and we were paying to a dead money cap to beat us? Imagine if the Falcons beat the Dolphins and we're paying him money to beat us. That's an excellent.
No, it wouldn't happen. But I'm glad you said it, because can you imagine? Can you imagine how humiliating that is for a front office to be like, well, we're paying this guy so much money to hammer us. This is pretty awful. Can I just jump out of the corporate box right now? Yeah, it won't happen, but it is a hilarious thought.
That would be amazing. But my next nominee is two quarterbacks that are probably the antithesis of Tua, can play in big games. So Ben, you mentioned you wanted Pat Saints. I've gone for Saints. I've gone for Saints Patriots, but a bit earlier than that, I've gone for the Super Bowl 46, which was the 2011 season. This is a season that had it's one of the best ever quarterback seasons in the NFL. There was 3 quarterbacks with 5,000 passing yards or more. These were Drew Brees, Tom Brady, and Matthew Stafford. Now, at the time, so Drew Brees had a total of 5,476. Brady had 5,235. These were, at the time, the best 2 single-season passing seasons in history. And even now, Brees is still second, only behind Peyton Manning's 2013 season. And Brady's that season is still 5th in all time, only behind in 3rd place, or Brady's 2021 season with the Bucks, and Mahomes a year later with the Chiefs. Now, I will say this might be low down because we did get the giant shock in the Patriots and the Mario Manningham catch instead. So we got a pretty good Super Bowl instead. But the Saints lost in the divisional round to the 49ers. And, of course, the Patriots would lose in the Super Bowl. But you think about 2 quarterbacks having such iconic seasons, historic seasons at the time, going up against each other in a Super Bowl, I think that would be pretty cool.
Yeah, I wish we'd had more Drew Brees in the Super Bowl. I'm glad he got his ring, and he got it against one of the greats as well. He played against Peyton Manning. Although I think that would have been a fantastic game, I feel it is harsh on those Giants. Giants won that Super Bowl, Andy. I mean, God, you're trying to take them out of the game. But I will not disagree that I would rather watch Drew Brees than Eli Manning.
Well, Eli Manning's only 2 ever playoff seasons were those 2 Super Bowl wins. He never ever made the playoffs. And can you imagine if you had Peyton Manning's regular season combined with Eli Manning's postseason? If you combine that as one quarterback, that would probably be a 5-time Super Bowl winner, because Peyton Manning had his problems in the postseason. But Eli Manning,
surely, if they could go back in time, surely the Manning parents, Archie, and I don't know what their mum's called, but I know Archie because obviously he played in the NFL. That if they could have seen into the future, I think they would have taken those 2 boys to the doctors and said, "Is there some way that we can merge these 2? Is there something in medical science that we want regular season Peyton and playoff Eli? You've just got to force these 2 into one body. You can make this happen." What are we doing? We can put a man on the moon, but we can't force 2 players into one body. And I don't know what the scientists are focusing on, because I do love that. Peyton Manning is the one player of his era who I'm devastated didn't play a game in London. I've never seen and will never see Peyton Manning play live. And of all the players who were active since the international series has been on, he's the one that I feel I've most missed out on. So yeah, love a bit of Peyton Manning. But I don't want to discredit Eli Manning. But for the record, Eli Manning should not be a Hall of Famer. I cannot stress that enough.
See,
Nope. I have two playoff seasons. You said it yourself, Andy. Come on.
But having been there, it's all about moments. The Hall of Fame is littered with these, I don't know, glove worn by that player. This happened. I feel like for NFL history, you think about the David Tyree catch, the Manningham catch.
Okay, should they be in the Hall of Fame? No.
Yeah.
No. Because this is the thing. Eli has got his rings. He's got his MVPs. That is incredible. That is enough. He will always be known for those games, and deservedly so. But is he better than other quarterbacks in the Hall of Fame? No, he is not. I mean, I do feel that this is obviously we could do a Hall of Fame snubs, or that's the sort of off-season show that I'm sure we would have a lot of fun with. But I'm of the opinion that Eli, despite his fantastic Super Bowl performances, is not Hall of Fame caliber.
Yeah, you mentioned Tyree Manningham. Joe Tyree never had a career reception after that Super Bowl. He never had a reception in his career after that game. And Manningham, I don't think, did much after that game either. It's just incredible. You think about also Santonio Holmes. I mean, he didn't do much after that moment as well. But yeah, to have he joined the Ravens, didn't really. I think looking at the stats here, he had 10 games for the Ravens, but no receptions, which is incredible because you think about that moment surely would buy you a bit of time. People would want to give you more of a chance because of what you've done in that game. But
I think it kind of proves my argument about Eli Manning, and not that Eli Manning just had those 2 games in his career, but that sometimes a player will have an incredible game in the most important moment, but day to day, week to week, do you watch that player and think that is a Hall of Famer? And that's what it comes down to. But I do feel like I'm digressing. I've pulled us into an Eli Manning Hall of Fame conversation when we were not even talking about putting the Giants in a game. You were taking them out of a game. And here I am now criticizing Eli Manning, despite the fact I said it was harsh taking the Giants out of that game. So I should probably shut up.
Well, you have convinced me. Maybe I wouldn't put him in. But one thing that is actually a good idea for the next one we do top 10, not only are we picking our top 10 Hall of Fame snubs, we've then got to pick a player to take out of the Hall of Fame to put that player in. That is an episode, could be this off-season, could be next off-season. That is something I think we should do, because that would be, I think, quite a fun episode. And
yeah, absolutely.
Joe Namath might be in that top 10 players taken out. So on to your penultimate selection, your penultimate nominee, Ben. Which game are you next putting in your top 10?
So this is the one that I bumped down. And it's the 49ers again, but I'm keeping the 49ers in. It's the 81 49ers, Super Bowl 16. The 49ers, this was their first ever Super Bowl victory. They beat the Bengals. And this is no disrespect to the Bengals, who were really good, deserved to be there. Ken Anderson is an incredibly underrated quarterback of that era. But the Chargers at that time were probably the most exciting team of the early 1980s. And the way they could air it out was a preview of what the NFL does today. And it was at a time where that sort of thing didn't really happen. Dan Fouts was the quarterback, another one of those players who is among the greatest to never win a Super Bowl, just like Dan Marino. Don Coryell was the head coach of the Chargers at that time, one of the most influential coaches of all time. It took such a long time for him to be put in the Hall of Fame. His offense was called the Air Coryell offense. Joe Gibbs, who would later win 3 Super Bowls with the Redskins, was offensive coordinator there. That Chargers team was like a team from the 2010s, but somehow in the late 70s, early 80s, when all the rules were designed to make it that it was incredibly difficult to pass. You could practically punch a wide receiver in the face, like as they were coming off the line of scrimmage. That Chargers team really deserved to be in a Super Bowl. I think there might even be one of those America's Game, the Missing Rings episodes about teams that just didn't make it. If you don't know about the Chargers of that era, look up some videos from Air Coryell. Look at what they were doing and how modern that offense seemed at a time where, if you watch games from the early 1980s, they do not look like the modern NFL, but the Chargers did. And the Bengals gave the 49ers a good game, but the Chargers could have beaten them. That Dan Fouts offense really deserved its place on the big stage. It was an indoor Super Bowl, so Dan Fouts could have done whatever he wanted. Dan Fouts against Joe Montana, before my time, wasn't even the NFL wasn't even on Channel 4 at this point. It was might have been the final Super Bowl to not be shown live in the UK. That Super Bowl 16, if I remember correctly. But I wish it had happened, even though I couldn't have watched it.
Fair enough. We'll go on to my penultimate nominee, and I'm going for a bit of a similar one to kind of similar kind of theme to my last one, about who we could have got. Now this one again, I am saying this game should be in place of one of the best ever Super Bowls. I'm going for Super Bowl 49, and I'm going for Packers against Patriots, because one thing we never got in the Super Bowl was Rodgers against Brady. It was the same sort of time as Messi against Ronaldo, and it felt like at the time a lot of talk about, is Rodgers the best quarterback in the league? Is it Brady? And you think about having those two up against each other. We had Brady against Mahomes, so we thankfully got that. Of course, never got Brady against Manning for obvious reasons in a Super Bowl. But you think about how the Packers didn't get there. So they were in the NFC Championship against the Seattle Seahawks, and they were 16-0 up in the fourth quarter. And in the fourth quarter, there was 10:53 on the game clock. Mason Crosby kicked a 49-yard field goal. They were 19-7 up. And this was still the case with 3 minutes left of the entire game in the fourth quarter. Seahawks score with 2 minutes and 9 seconds left, took the lead with 1 minute 25 left. Packers scored a field goal, took it to overtime, and then Seattle scored after Wilson found a curse for a 35-yard walk-off field goal. And for those that do remember as well, it was there was a fake field goal as well that resulted in a touchdown. And that same day, it was the Deflategate game with Patriots against Colts, where they won 45-7. And we did get one of the greatest moments and one of the greatest games in Super Bowl history. So maybe it should be low down. Maybe I shouldn't even be including this. But the fact that we didn't get a Brady against Rodgers, and you could put that the same case for 2011 because Rodgers won MVP despite there being three other players who got 5,000 yards passing. I believe he had the most touchdowns that season, Rodgers. But yeah, we would have been removed of the Malcolm Butler interception, but we were also robbed at some point in the NFL history of a Rodgers against Brady Super Bowl.
I mean, I love your love of quarterbacks. So I would agree. I think it would have been great to see, because Aaron Rodgers at various points was the best of the NFC and Tom Brady the best of the AFC. And Russell Wilson is not a Hall of Famer. That was a great game, the one that the Patriots beat the Seahawks in, not just because of that amazing Malcolm Butler interception, but it was a really good game. I think the year before, was it the year before, 2 years before, where which one was it? No, it was longer ago than that. It was like about 4 or 5 years before, where the Packers beat the Steelers. And if the Patriots could have been better in that season, but was that the season that that Brady was injured? No, it wasn't. No,
that
Brady was the season after. Yeah. No. Yes. 08. It was 08. Of course, it was 08.
Yeah.
A Rodgers, like you said about Peyton Manning being the way he played in the regular season and the way he played in the playoffs. I do look at Rodgers a little bit like that. And it's not like I look at those Colts teams or those Packers teams and like, oh God, look at the way that Rodgers choked, or look at the way that Peyton Manning choked. But they just didn't quite have the aura that they had in the regular season. And in terms of pure quarterbacking, there aren't many better than Rodgers and Peyton Manning. And yet certain players had more success than both of them. But a Rodgers Brady Super Bowl, with the way that they played, it's hard to argue against that.
Absolutely. And we're probably getting a modern day version of that with Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen in the playoffs. Heading on now to your final nominee, Ben. Which game are you putting in?
Oh, I did a list of 10. I always do this when I'm doing this with you, Andy, because I just have no idea what you will pick. My thought was you're going to go for more modern games, which is perfect, and I'm going to go for older games, so it balances out nicely. I had some. You talked about Kerry Collins. This isn't my pick, but I was going to say, if it got to it, Super Bowl 31, the 1996 season, Jaguars Panthers, when I think Kerry Collins was the quarterback of the Panthers, because they were both expansion teams in their second season and both got to the conference championship. That's not meant to happen. I would have loved to see that. That would have been fun, but ridiculous. That 42-10 Redskins over Broncos victory, it might have been better if the Browns had beaten the Broncos and got to that Super Bowl. But I am going to go with, God, so many good ones. I'm going with Super Bowl 27, which was the 92 season. The Dolphins should have been there. The Dolphins lost to the Bills. The Bills were in the Super Bowl, got annihilated by the Cowboys. Now, admittedly, the Bills had beaten the Dolphins in the conference championship, so it's not like they'd fluked their way there. But once again, this was a Dolphins team that had won a division and was, on paper, better than the team that they lost to in the conference championship. That game would have been there in the Rose Bowl, the start of, or maybe not, the Cowboys dynasty against the wily veteran Dan Marino, against Troy Aikman, Jimmy Johnson, coach of the Cowboys, who'd been coach for so many years at the University of Miami. To have the Dolphins against the Cowboys, two of the most beloved franchises in the NFL, in that game, instead of what was a terrible performance from the Buffalo Bills, who by that point we were sick of watching in the Super Bowl. That would have been brilliant, which is why I said at the top of the show, there's a lot of Dolphins in my list. And the fact that I've mentioned 5 games and Dan Marino was the quarterback in 2 of the 5 says a lot about how close the Dolphins were to reaching multiple Super Bowls. And they would have had a great chance of winning this game. The Buffalo Bills just absolutely collapsed. They seemed to have no idea what they were doing. And my hope would have been, at the very least, Don Shula's Dolphins would have given the Cowboys a game.
Yeah, it's I think it's painful, and I'm just thankful that I wasn't old enough to really memorize. There's doesn't really be, I don't get much pain from hearing this because I wasn't alive for it. But if I ever hear about that Titans game a couple of years ago, or any of our recent stuff that we've lost, it does bring me a bit more heartache. I've not had. That's the only good thing about not being a good team. I haven't experienced much playoff heartache as a fan. I've only seen 3 playoff games in my entire 16 years being a fan. So yeah.
And yeah, it's different when the team that you've adopted is losing in the playoffs and has got like a Hall of Fame head coach and a Hall of Fame quarterback, that you can easily make the case that, you know, both of them as a combo are perhaps in the top 5 or top 10 head coach quarterback combinations of all time. And the idea they didn't win one together, obviously Shula won multiple Super Bowls, but the idea that they didn't win one together is more painful living through that than a team that, if you're a Dolphins fan, like you say, for the last 16 years, it's not like you've had that combination. It's not like you would look back on that era and think, how did they not win multiple Super Bowls? How were they not just constantly like in that game with the potential of winning a Lombardi trophy? It is a different sort of pain. And it's why I love these teams that were successful in the 80s and early 90s that have such great support in the UK, that their fans went through so much and have stuck with that team and helped us get to the situation now where we have all these games in London, we have all these opportunities. And yeah, Dan Marino, love the guy.
Yeah, he is easily the best quarterback to never win it. Probably along with Randy Moss, maybe the best 2 players overall to never win a Super Bowl. Now, my last
feels
nominee,
like a list, and it feels like a show.
Yeah, I think that we did that already.
Have you done it?
I think last year we did a previous episode on the best. I'll double check that if we haven't done it, then that's something we can look at as well. So my last nominee is actually once again quarterback based, as is I'll do my honorable mention, which was Vikings Colts Super Bowl 44, Favre against Manning. But this one's a bit of a more light-hearted reason why. And it's again to do with quarterbacks, and I promise you, listeners, I do watch more positions than just the quarterback. But not only would this have been a game which would involve 2 teams that haven't won a Super Bowl before, we were robbed of a Blake Bortles against Case Keenum Super Bowl in Super Bowl 52. And you think about what happened with the divisional round, the Minneapolis Miracle, they couldn't quite live up to that in the game against the Eagles. We think about Jack Patriots, that lead they had in the 4th quarter. Miles Jack wasn't down, I want to say as well. They had that incident. It could have easily been, well, the Jags should have been there. I think they really missed a chance. I think last season as well, but certainly that year when they lost to the Patriots. I just think I've talked about quarterback matchup. You think about, I've talked about Breeze against Brady or Brady against Rodgers. You talked about if it was Montana against Steve Young, and it's been many years. We had Brady against Mahomes a few years ago. You think about even what Hurts and Mahomes did in that one Super Bowl. This would have been as a one-off, I think, quite funny. I mean, both quarterbacks, Case Keenum against Blake Bortles almost happened. It could have easily been that. It could have easily been that game. And I think purely for, like Kerry Collins against Trent Dilfer, I think as some of, I think it would have been funny. I think we'd have seen 2 good defenses as well. We think about Saxonville, what we could have, I think they would have won. I think the Jags would have won that game purely because of Saxonville. But I just think, in terms of Also, it would have been Doug Marone against. Oh, who the hell was the Viking? Oh, I can see his face. Grey-haired guy.
It wasn't Brad Childress then, was it? No.
No, he lost his job, I want to say, a few years after that, and he became a DC somewhere. Zimmer, Mike Zimmer.
Oh, yeah, of course it was. Oh, my God.
We did the top 10 worst winning as well as best winning Super Bowl coaches, and we talked about that. Doug Marone would have been in that top 10, I guarantee you. If
that you should, for suggesting this game, you should be on some sort of register. That is an absolutely disgusting but hilarious choice. The idea of the way that you've talked so passionately about some of the incredible quarterback matchups that we didn't quite have, and then you want Keenum versus Bortles. I was there when Bortles was drafted. It's I can't co-sign that one, but it is funny. I'll give you that. It does have the comedy appeal.
And also it would have had something that I really want to have at some point in my life, to see a Super Bowl where neither team's won it before. I really want to see a Super Bowl. I don't think we almost had it the year when the Bucs played the Raiders. We almost had it then with the two teams that lost. But I think, I've never ever seen a Super Bowl where neither team's won it before. That for me would be something amazing, because either way you're going to get a fan base that is seeing something brand new, and to have two teams like that would have been great. But there we are. We've got our top 10, and as per normal, I'm going to give you a chance as well as me to give one game you think should be in the top 5 regardless, and one game you'd be happy to sacrifice being a bit low down. Now, I think I'm going to sacrifice my one with Packers against Patriots, purely because we wouldn't have got the Malcolm Butler interception. But I do feel like Chiefs Rams should be in that top 5 regardless. But how about you, Ben?
But you're not sacrificing Bortles versus Keenum.
No, that's not the humour element.
Yeah. I will take out the Dolphins Cowboys Super Bowl 27 that I just talked about, because I think we're going to have Marino elsewhere.
Okay, I mean,
and what am I going to put in? It's an obvious one. I'm going to put in the Bears Dolphins, what we should have had for Super Bowl 20.
Okay, so we've got Dolphins, Bears, and Chiefs Rams in our top 5 locked in, and we've got Dolphins, Cowboys, and Packers against Patriots also locked in. Now, I'm personally happy to have Dolphins, Cowboys above, because again, I can't think what the Super Bowl was, but what you said was not a great game. Whereas
it was an atrocious one. It was atrocious. It definitely would have been an improvement. It wasn't just a fun matchup replacing a good game. It was replacing a terrible game. So yeah, I think pop it above.
And I think I'll put Saints Patriots as well. I realise that I'm putting 2 of my nominees in the bottom 3, but again, the fact that we wouldn't have got that Giants upset win, Manningham catch, I'll put that in 8. So we got Saints against Patriots. Then left to pick, we've got Vikings Broncos in Super Bowl 33. We have what else do we have here? We have Super Bowl 35, Ravens, Rams. Super Bowl 28-29, Niners against Chiefs. That one I think I want to put in the top 5. That's an amazing one.
Yeah, the storyline alone, I think that needs to be top 5.
Yeah. And
so I'll as a gambit to that, I'll say let's put the 49ers Chargers game, Super Bowl 16. Let's put that in the bottom 5. So we haven't gone too Montana heavy in the top of the list.
That's fine. And I think the fact that you also had this one as well as me, I think I'd like to put Falcons Vikings in the top 5 because of the fact that you were considering
Broncos Vikings,
replacing
the Falcons. Yeah.
Oh yeah, sorry, Broncos Vikings, not Falcons Vikings. That means you've got 2 games left to try and pick as 5th or 6th, and this is we've got Super Bowl 35 and we've done Super Bowl 35, Ravens against Rams, and Super Bowl Super Bowl 16 with the 49ers against the Chargers.
Oh yeah, no, I'd said to put
Yeah.
the 49ers Chargers in the bottom half. I think.
Oh, we've got Jags Vikings. I missed out on. That's one I forgot to.
I see. I don't think that can go top 5.
Okay, that's fair enough. So that is 3 of my 5 nominees are in the bottom 5. It's not a good look for me.
You did have a comedy one though, to be fair.
Yeah,
so,
to be fair. So that means we've got that means our 5th one is going to be what am I missing out?
So Ravens versus Rams.
Okay, that's fine. So we've got basically our top 5, our 5 to 10 done. So we've got, I think, Packers, Patriots, then Dolphins, Cowboys, then Saints, Patriots, then Niners, Chargers, then Jags against Vikings, then Ravens, Rams, Broncos, Vikings. So that means we've got then Broncos, Vikings, Chiefs, Niners, Dolphins against Chiefs. So Dolphins against Bears, and also the Rams against the Chiefs. Ooh.
Yeah, this is tricky. This is tricky.
I think it should be Dolphins, Bears, or Rams, Chiefs in the top 2. But then again, the Montana against Young, that's a really good one.
It is, but to me, in terms of there's a chance the Chiefs got blown out in that game. You know, they didn't even make the conference championship. They had a worse record than various other teams in the AFC. They were good enough to reach the Super Bowl, I think, but it was not like that Vikings that we were talking about, where 15-1. How did they not reach it? It wasn't like that. It would have been an incredible storyline. I think that the top 2, and we can discuss the order, should be the other 2: Rams, Dolphins, and Chiefs, Rams. I think those are the top 2, and it's good that they're from different eras.
Okay, so that means we've got to try and decide who's 3rd and who's 4th. Broncos, Vikings, or Niners, Chiefs? Because I kind of think, like you said, it would have been a better game, probably Broncos, Vikings, than Niners, Chiefs. But I just keep thinking back to because I do love build up to games, wherever sport it is. I watch pre-game coverage way more than post-game coverage in sports. The thought of that build-up, or the 2 weeks building up to it, and you think about someone now who's been to Super Bowls and gone to these media events at the Super Bowls, the thought of being there and seeing all the talk around Young and Montana and watching all the TV coverage, but then I do realize that the Broncos Vikings would have been one hell of a game, and you got the infamous Gary Anderson moment. So maybe we do put that 49ers Chiefs 4th and maybe Vikings Broncos 3rd.
Yeah, I think that probably is correct. It is a tough one, and they are very different for the reasons you outlined. One is what an incredible missed opportunity by the Vikings. That game could have been a classic, and the other is just perhaps the ultimate grudge match that we would have had in a Super Bowl, and just the atmosphere that would have created. But Vikings Broncos would probably have been a better game. But my God, I mean, we are splitting hairs. Those are 2 games that would be absolute just must-see TV.
It would be great. I really think it could be good. So that means we've got then to try and pick between Dolphins, Bears, and Rams, Chiefs. This might be the hardest one to pick so far. I think either way, I think whoever you pick number 1, I think it's I'm not going to begrudge whichever way around we do it. I think either one is a good one. I really don't know. This is really hard because
for me it's Bears Dolphins, because it would have been one of the most pivotal Super Bowls in history. The legacy of players and organizations would have come down to that day. That it would have been such an important moment. Whereas that Rams team won a Super Bowl, Mahomes won multiple Super Bowls. Like those 2 teams carried on with that sort of success. And yes, they didn't have that Super Bowl, but they were not defined by missing out on that Super Bowl. That Bears team of that era, arguably the greatest team of all time. The idea that the Dolphins were the team that prevented them from having a perfect season. The Dolphins, the only team in NFL history to ever have a perfect season. The rematch that there would have been. Dan Marino, the best quarterback in the league against the best defense of all time. There's just so much there that would have just changed how we look at those teams. I think, you said earlier on, I think you're absolutely right. If the Dolphins play in that Super Bowl and beat them, everything we think about the Bears of that era is completely different. And it would have all changed on one Sunday evening. That's not to say it would have happened, but that's what it could have been. And we'd look at Dan Marino as not someone who didn't win a Super Bowl, but won a Super Bowl against one of the greatest teams ever. So that to me is why it's number one, because it would have been like a one-off, whereas we've seen the Chiefs and Rams have subsequent success.
Yeah, I mean, the only guy really missed out was Jared Goff in all of this.
Yes.
Do you think it would have been a better game in terms of if Dolphins played Bears and Rams against Chiefs? In terms of the actual quality of the game, I know you can't replicate what happened in that Week 9 game, whenever it was that season. But do you think, as purely from a game point of view, taking away narrative, Rams Chiefs would be better than Dolphins Bears?
I would say no, because I think it's kind of styles make fights. So the difference in the Dolphins and the Dolphins and the Bears, the way that they played, the way that it was so different, I think is what makes it compelling. The fact that the Bears defense was all about being incredibly aggressive, and the way the Dolphins offense was about minimizing that aggression and using that aggression against the defense. I think that's what would make it so compelling, rather than necessarily the kind of the back and forth point scoring that we may well have had if they could have replicated that regular season game. And also, if they don't replicate it, then we would look back perhaps and say, well, that was a disappointing Super Bowl, because we saw one of the greatest games of all time on Monday Night Football just a few months ago. And then the Super Bowl was much cagier and it was close and it wasn't quite the same. So styles, the contrasting styles, I think is what makes it. That Dolphins team is one of the best teams that Dolphins team of 85 is one of the best teams to not make a Super Bowl. And they would have been playing against the most interesting team to play against because of what happened in the season and because of the difference between their coaching philosophies.
I think you swung my arm. I think as well, the Rams made that Super Bowl. The Rams still made it, and they were terrible. And the Chiefs,
yes, they were boring in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, and the Chiefs were in actually a lot of Super Bowls. They've not been ahead for many quarters. You think about in the one they won in Vegas against the Niners, they only led when they won that game at the end with that kick from back there. You think about they were never ahead in either loss. They were terrible in both losses. And then Niners game, they were awful for a lot of it. And the Eagles won, they were behind for a lot of it. So the Chiefs actually, I know they won Super Bowls, but they've actually been terrible for the first three quarters in most of those games. So,
yeah, that's a fair point. We've not seen an incredible Mahomes performance where he's just lighting it up and going absolutely ham. It's been different, and maybe that's because that's the way that Super Bowls are. But yeah, it's a fair point, and it perhaps suggests that we would not have got that regular season game part 2.
Yeah, I agree. Well, there we are. We've got our top 10 lists combined. So running through again, 10th is Super Bowl 49, Packers Patriots. Number 9 is Super Bowl 27, Dolphins Cowboys. Number 8 is Super Bowl 46, Saints against Patriots. Number 7 is the 49ers against the Chargers in Super Bowl 16. Number 6 is Jaguars against Vikings in Super Bowl 53. Number 5 is Super Bowl 35, Ravens Rams. 4 is Niners Chiefs in Super Bowl 29. 3 is Broncos Vikings in Super Bowl 33. 2 is Rams against Chiefs in Super Bowl 53. And finally, number 1 is Dolphins against Bears in Super Bowl 20. And I realise it's Jags Vikings in 52, not 53. But there we are. That is our top 10. And we will put a graphic on socials of this top 10. So do let us know in the comments, either on this podcast or on socials, what you think about top 10. Are the games we've missed out on? Are the games we've ranked too high or too low? Let us know in the comments. But either way, Ben, huge thank you for coming on today. And I realise we've gone over our time slot, but yeah, huge thank you for coming on today.
My pleasure. I have been, since we kind of set this and we kind of booked this in for this particular date, which we did about like 6 weeks ago or something. I've thought about it so much because it's that kind of parallel universe thing of like, what if it's the sort of thing that just sets my mind racing. And I run most mornings, and it's the sort of thing that I'm on my run and I keep thinking about, like, oh, what about this game? What about this game? What about this game? So I've had a lot of fun recording this, but I've had a lot of fun in the weeks building up to it as well. So thanks for having me on.
Well, no problem at all. And those of you that are living under the rock and don't know who Ben is, we will put his link to his socials in the description to the episodes, and make sure you give him a follow if you haven't already. And hope you enjoyed the episode. And in the meantime, this has been the Across the Pod NFL podcast, our top 10 Super Bowls that we never got, with, as ever, your host today in myself, Andy Davis, and our guest today in Ben Isaacs. And we'll see you guys for our next episode. Take care.